Welcome to The Conquered, a Guyver Future AU fanfiction. The events on X-Day and the rebellion after are well known. It was what came after that really changed the galaxy. Thank you for listening. Let's begin. The Conquered, Chapter 1, Alkenfell. Happy days, a smile. Things were simple. We were so young then, so naive, so innocent, and it's for that loss I hate him the most. Guyver, Makishima Agito. But, no. I can't blame him for everything. There were too many things that have brought us to this place. Yamamura, Chronos, Murakami, Advents, Alkenfell, Teki, Guyvers. There are too many factors to name and it doesn't really matter. They all brought us to this place. These are the times I'm glad I don't have my brother's ability. What has happened raises enough questions without being able to see, or at least calculate what could have possibly happened. But really, it began with Sho finding the unit, and despite how bad things got then, it was when Alkenfell came onto the scene that everything changed. X-Day and everything after, dramatic as they were, are just a part of that change. Why do I write this? I am not impartial and I am eternal, so I will remember forever, but forever is a very long time and perceptions change. It has to be done now, so that in the future, flawed as this telling may be, something exists that tells what happened, something so the future knows the blood it was born in. Where to start? The events on Earth, X-Day and the simmering rebellion after are well documented, so I will skip over them. My own slant on those events is somewhat different, but then I was involved and so perhaps cannot see the whole truth there. Besides, no matter what other faults Chronos had, they weren't afraid of the truth, and their records of those events, one-sided as they may be, are now available to the public. Instead, I will start with the fall of Chronos, something that has never been documented truly. I say truly because, while it has been documented, Makishima Agito's official history varies somewhat from the truth of the matter, and understanding of this event and the true roles of the participants helps in understanding what was to happen. It was a foreshadowing of the powers that were to awaken. So, let us begin. It has been recorded that after X-Day, Chronos ruled the Earth for 5 years before Alkenfell was defeated in combat. Many argue that those 5 years weren't so bad. There was peace with only minor rebellions. Many also argue that Chronos would have been in a far better position to lead the Earth in the fight that was to come, and in hindsight I must say that is perhaps correct. Chronos had been preparing for an interstellar battle, but they did not say much about that, and I only know because I was privy to what information the rebels could gather. But that isn't the question here. It is not a question of right or wrong, or who may or may not have been better. It is a question of what did happen. It was 5 years after X-Day and 3 years after Fukumachi's Sho revived. That was when the final battle against Alkenfell took place. There is a bittersweet sadness here. Alkenfell himself was not evil, but yet he had to fall. There was no other way, his power over Zoanoids too great for him just to step aside, but that wasn't his fault. He was designed that way. The battle with Alkenfell came only after the defeat of 4 of the other Zolords, Lugnag de Krumegnik, Karblal Khan, Wayfadanos and Rienzi. No matter what Makishima's official history says, the defeat of each of them did not come easily, and they were not, in the end, achieved by him alone. It took the working of the two Guyvers together, with both ground and air support, to defeat those 4 Zolords. They were the hardest battles we had ever undertaken, and while the troops who supported the Guyvers in those battles may feel that they did little, conventional weaponry's lack of effect against Zoanoids is well documented. Their persistent firing and even the smoke caused by the discharge of their weapons did provide annoyance to the Zolord and cover for the two Guyvers. About the only thing that Makishima gets right is the fact that he did wield the gigantic unit in those battles. At that time, I know Sho didn't care who had it. It was only in the battle against Alkenfell when who wielded it became important. While a Guyver can fight and defeat any Zoanoid easily, a Guyver fighting against a Zolord is more pushed. It is possible for a Guyver to defeat a Zolord, but it would be a very close thing. The gigantic unit ensured the victory fell to the Guyvers, but in the battle against Alkenfell it was the only thing allowing the Guyvers to fight equally against him. He was that powerful. I do not know how much stock to put in the reports that on that day he wasn't at full power, because it was a close thing as it was. No matter what power level Alkenfell was at that day, it is true that he could have fought the other 11 Zolords and emerged victorious. Fighting him was fighting the entire Chronos organization, every Zoanoid, every Zolord, all at once, all their combined power compressed into one being. And the battle that day was not planned. It was meant to be a simple mission to disrupt Chronos supply lines and grab equipment, but then when Alkenfell appeared in that routine mission, everything changed. Retreat was the first option, and it was tried, but the Zolord was not going to let the Guyvers escape after they had defeated 4 of his lords. Fighting him and defeating him became the only option that allowed survival. What is most remarkable about this battle is how openly it was conducted. Chronos were masters of deception, but in this case Alkenfell opted for pure combat, open battle, pitching his formidable strength against that of his enemies. What also can be said about this battle is it is the one where Agito gave up his delusion that Sho was a pawn. In that battle Agito came to see Sho as an equal, a potentially dangerous enemy. Someone who would, but more importantly could stand in the way of his plans. And that was perhaps the most dangerous realization to come out of that battle. It happened so fast. Fukumachi, get those 3. Gamma Group, grab the armaments and then retreat. Agito, Guyver 3 issued the orders absently while simultaneously firing off several gravity balls at the encroaching Enzyme 3 Zoanoids. The battle was going to plan and Chronos would now lose vital armaments and supplies. We're on it, boss. Sho activated his gravity globe, climbing into the air, as he targeted the Guyver Units' head beam at the 3 enzyme eyes Agito had indicated. They were faster than the originals, and their range was greater, but they still couldn't fly and their ability to project their enzymatic fluid upwards was limited. Gravity could be made to work in your favor occasionally. Fighting enzyme Zoanoids was best accomplished from the sky, although it did take a frightening amount of power. A shadow passed across the sun and Sho shivered, sensing something. He looked around, ignoring his current foes. Something wasn't right. His sensors had picked up another Zoanoid, a powerful Zoano. Guyver 3. Behind. What? Ear. A blast from nowhere ripped through Makishima's shoulder. Finally, I have the 2 of you together. It can come to an end, once and for all. Alkenfell. Several of the human troops whispered the word almost reverentially, eyes widening in fear as they frantically searched for the Zolord. Heat haze appeared and shattered, revealing the immaculately groomed and suited Zolord of Zolords. All groups fall back. Abandon objectives and retreat, Makishima ordered, ignoring the wound in his shoulder that his unit was already repairing. He hadn't survived for this long against Chronos by fighting unwinnable battles, and at the moment, no matter how much it hurt his pride to admit it, they just weren't ready to fight Alkenfell. His troops needed more training, and Fukumachi needed much more practice with his unit before he could even provide an adequate distraction for Alkenfell in battle. At the moment, Guyver, I wouldn't even be a suitable sacrifice. I can't allow that. A casual wave and power was released, ribbons of air scythes cutting everything and everyone in their path. I have waited too long for this moment. You have stood in the way of Chronos for too long, and my plans cannot be delayed any longer. Well, they're just gonna have to be. Thunderbolts, Beta, Delta fire. We take out this bastard and we win. You got it, Colonel. This is amusing, human, but not even your precious Guyver leader will be able to help you. I'll still back him, the Colonel responded, lining his rifle for a shot at Alkenfell's eye, the one spot that may be weak. But at heart the Colonel was a realist. He knew his time was over, and his only hope to strike at Chronos was to try to injure Alkenfell. Anything else would be too much to ask. He'd go down fighting and hope his contribution would be enough to allow his leader to win. Chronos had taken his son, they would take his life, but he would go down fighting them, and his spirit would endure to the day when they were crushed. The energy pellet flew true, but Alkenfell's power was such that it dissipated more than a meter from its target. Amusing, human. Alkenfell stated once again, releasing his wind scythes to cut through what was left of Beta and Delta teams. Blood, bone and worse splattered on the ground and plants, painting the green of the jungle pass red and giving it a thick runoff. The air became tinged with a coppery perfume that clung thickly, sickly sweet to the back of the throat, even through bio-booster armor. No. What is it, Guyver? The Zolord questioned mildly, turning to face Fukumachi. Beneath the armor, Sho's eyes hardened and his armor shifting slightly around him in line with his new mindset. Its blades altered their angles. Sensors focused, and it expelled excess heat. Leave them out of this. Your fight is with us. For once you speak the truth. And I will fight you in my true form. You were killed by my last attack, and this time I will ensure that you remain dead. Alkenfell turned slightly to look up at Makishima where the Dark Guyver had been lining up the gigantic unit's Mega Smasher on the Zolord. And you, my dear Zeus, you will not survive. You should have been content to be consumed by Chronos. Quote. Golden energy flickered, almost imperceptibly at first before it flared into bright painful lines. Within the conflagration of energy Alkenfell changed, his clothing ripped apart by the golden spines that sprouted all over his body, the yellow energy arcing between the individual spikes, burning the air. With a growl his transformation was complete and all over the world Zolord and Zoanoid alike trembled at the power they could feel. I am the Zolord Alkenfell, first and most loved creation of the Advents. And I will destroy you. Prepare yourselves. Makishima hadn't waited for the Zolord to complete his transformation. He didn't have time to line up and charge the Giga Smasher but could and did release an almost continuous barrage of gravity globes as he feinted left, extending his vibroblade and charging in. Alkenfell was a formidable telepathic fighter. He had to be injured quickly so that some of his ability was focused inwards. That was the only way they were going to have a chance. Not necessarily to fight but to survive. Fukamachi was paralyzed with surprise for only an instant, although the faint glow from his control medallion showed that it was ready to take action. He shot his head beam at Alkenfell, charging the biolaser as much as he dared before releasing the energy. Beta and Delta teams were gone. Alpha and Gamma had already left carrying what was to be the prime objective of this mission. That left Epsilon, although a quick survey of the surrounding area showed that there were only a few survivors and they were too busy trying to help each other clear the area to be of any use. With a faint sigh, Sho nodded. With Epsilon retreating, that meant that all the non-combatants who could had left the area. There would be no distractions in this fight and no innocents who could be used against them. Not unless Chronos had something planned, but he could not sense any Zoanoids waiting in the wings. He screamed, allowing his unit to use the noise to create a sonic wave that it sent directly into the smoke and dust that now surrounded Alkenfell. Makishima was clear of the debris and was concentrating on hitting the growing cloud with his entire arsenal. No. The word was a whisper, although it was unclear who spoke. There was a laugh and it was coming from the center of the dust cloud. Both Guyvers ceased firing as a flicker of energy showed through the cloud, and as if a wind had blown it away, it disappeared, the last remaining tatters burnt away by the energy shield that surrounded Alkenfell. A laughing Alkenfell. He looked at both Guyvers, making sure his cat-like eyes met theirs squarely with an expression of cold superiority stamped on his features. Is that the best you can do? The question was spoken with an odd note of disappointment in his tone. Beneath his armor, Makishima's eyes narrowed. He had cut Alkenfell. He was sure of it. He had felt the blade connect with pliant flesh, but the Zolord showed no injury, was missing no appendages. It wasn't possible. He risked a glance towards his elbows, but all his blades were intact, so if he hadn't cut Alkenfell and his blades were intact, then what had he cut? Confused, Zeus? Alkenfell could sense the emotions of his opponents. They were a rich fare he intended to enjoy to the utmost. Each Guyver would experience all forms of despair, of confusion, anger and betrayal, of pain before he let them die. And he intended to savor every minute of it. I assure you, you did cut me, he continued, indicating to his forearm. But your blades are too sensitive. While you cut me, I was moving to avoid you, and so when your armor reported that you had cut me, you had only cut the first layer of cells on my skin. Would you like to try again? Although this time I guarantee you won't connect. Alkenfell smiled down at Makishima, seemingly unaware of the slash Fukamachi was about to deliver to his unprotected back. Guyver eye slashed downwards, or he tried to. His vibroblade struck Alkenfell's force field, lighting up the shield with crackling energy. The shield bent slightly to accommodate the blade, dissipating the force in movement. It almost wrapped itself completely around Sho's weapon. Within his protective casing, Alkenfell turned towards Sho. You see? He questioned. Your strongest attacks are as nothing to me. The Zolord reached out, and gripped Sho's blade through the shielding. He bent close, an almost sinister smile on his lips. Give it up, the words were whispered for Sho only. Alkenfell nose to nose with the younger Guyver. It is still not too late for you to join us. Join me, use your strength as Guyver I and you will be in a position to protect your friends. They will no longer be outcast, you will no longer be outcast. Hunted. Join me. Makishima watched as Sho tried to free himself from Alkenfal's grip. From where he was standing he could see that the boy was using all of the Guyver's formidable strength and was getting nowhere. That left only one way to escape, and even as he watched Sho raise his other arm to strike against himself, he saw the muscles in Alkenfal's arm tense an instant before he hurled Guyver away from him. Sho cried out as he was suddenly thrown into the jungle, plowing through several sturdy trees before he impacted with the ground. But even then the force of the throw caused a deep furrow. He shook his head as he rose, looking up groggily to see Agito trading careful blows with the Zolord, careful to keep his slashes light so that they could not be trapped by the shield. Stupid, Sho muttered to himself. Why are Zoanoids so stupid? I may not be as strong as Makishima, but I could never join Chronos. Father, lend me your strength. He jumped heavily in the air, feeling several twinges from his body that his unit was already moving to repair. Agito was stronger than him, but he would need help to defeat Alkenfal. I'm not strong enough to do it myself, but I will not run away, and with the strength of my father, I will fight. He hovered slightly for a few moments, assessing the situation, watching as Makishima and Alkenfal seemed to dance together, their steps one deadly choreographed act. The shield, that was the key. It sparked, energy echoing across its surface with every attack Guyver 3 connected, but at the same time it allowed the Zolord to land his attacks with his bare fists. Sho's eyes narrowed as he sought the best way to inform Agito about the shield through their link, but as Guyver 3 leapt back, forcing Alkenfal to extend himself in attack, he realized Makishima had worked it out. First blood, he hissed under his breath, watching as Agito brought his vibroblades down on Alkenfal's extended forearm. The Zolord's shield was strong, but it couldn't allow him to attack and defend simultaneously, and once he was committed. That was all the opening they would have. But it was all they needed. Ugga. What? The startled question left Sho's lips before he surged forward, intent on cutting Makishima free. I am the Zolord Alkenfal, the Zolord of Zolords. You think such an attack would work on me? Alkenfal drew his fist back from Agito's midriff, placing his hand over the Dark Guyver's control medallion and forcing Agito to meet his eyes, toying with him. He made no move to pull or damage the control medallion. He would destroy both Guyvers, but there was no need to cut this battle short. This belongs to you. With frightening ease he tightened his grip before throwing Agito, almost like a ragdoll, at the rapidly approaching Fukamachi. Sho managed to stop their fall before they impacted with the ground, but the shock of having Makishima plow into him was enough to jar his bones even through the armor. He looked up as he came to a stop, still supporting Agito, and blinked before losing all control over his gravity globe and plunging straight down into the tree cover. It was the only thing that saved them. In the space they had been in, a blizzard of energy flew by, the follow-up attack from Alkenfal, so vicious and powerful that it burned the very air. Sho flew through the trees, zipping around and between them at speeds he wouldn't have ever dared but for the power that was closing on them. He felt Makishima regain consciousness and threw Guyver 3 into the air as they both wove a path through the dense forest. We have to get that shield down. Sho sent to Agito using the telepathic link their armor gave them. I know, Guyver, I charge your Mega Smasher as you fly. When I give the signal we will both attack him. A double Mega Smasher attack at full power should melt his shield like butter. Agito sounded calm as he veered away from Sho, giving the instructions to his armor, not even bothering to wait for Fukamachi's reply, secure in the knowledge that Guyver I would obey him. All right, Sho confirmed the instruction. Maneuvering himself through the trees so that when they both attacked, they wouldn't accidentally fry each other. He began charging the Mega Smasher, ignoring the tightness in his chest that came from charging the weapon without opening the breastplate. There was only one danger with charging the Mega Smasher and keeping the breastplate closed: if an opposing energy hit him, all that contained energy would be locked within him. He'd be badly burnt, if he was lucky, but because Alkenfal wouldn't allow them to target him properly, there was no way to charge the Mega Smasher with the breastplate open. The weapon was devastating, but that was its one weakness, and while they could snipe at Alkenfal, releasing the instantaneously gathered energy, nothing short of a fully charged blast would have a hope of taking the Zolord's shield down. They had learnt that before X-Day. Now, Makishima shouted the command, for the first time showing emotion in this battle. Sho angled up from the trees, bursting through the canopy, spinning to face Alkenfal, as both hands griped his breastplates. pulling them open an instant before the devastating energy from the Mega Smasher was released at the Zolord. Guyver 3 released his blast at the same time, the gigantic unit releasing a much more intensive blast. Both blasts flew true, splashing up against Alkenfel's shield before all sight of the Zolord was lost to the intense energy. Alkenfel had had time to raise one arm in reflex against the assault, but as he looked over his forearm he was forced to close his inner eyelids against the glare, but he could see that the intense particle beams were eating away at his shield. His shield would hold against their blast but would hold against nothing else. With a snarl he snapped his arm down, reinforcing his shield while he could. No one had managed to bring his shield down, no one, not even Gyro in his miniature black hole. The Guyvers were going to pay for this insult. The intense heat from the blasts faded. Alkenfel snarled again, feeling his shield dissipate as he snapped his hand up, transforming the energy he had been using to maintain his shield into visible lines that arced through his fingers. He retracted his inner eyelids and focused his attention on Guyver I. The cursed Guyver 3 might be wielding the gigantic unit at the time, but it had been made from Guyver I's desire. There was something in that boy, something that the Advent technology responded to, and it was something dangerous. He could stand against Makishima in his own time, but he had to destroy Fukumachi now, while he could. It was a waste of a valuable resource, but the time when Fukumachi could be tamed to Chronos' side was gone. His cat-like irises narrowed and he raised his hand, blowing gently to shot an almost continuous barrage of energy towards Guyver I. Sho looked up to see Alkenfel emerge unscathed from the blast, but he had no time to feel the faint disappointment that gripped his heart. While his head had known the barrage probably wouldn't work, his heart had been hoping otherwise. He dodged left and drove upwards as 1,000 motes of light cleaved the area he had been in. Sho narrowed his eyes, closing the distance between him and the Zolord in an instant, pulling his arm back as he prepared to deliver a vicious slash to the Zolord. He did feel a slight twinge of joy as his vibroblade passed through the area Alkenfel's shield had been in, but then pain blossomed along his arm. "Ear!" Sho screamed, looking down at his arm. The dull green of the Guyver armor was covered in his blood, but the cuts were caused by the gold spines that were embedded in his arms at all angles. Holding his vibroblade a safe distance from Alkenfel's midriff. "I am not without defenses," the Zolord sneered down at him before striking Sho once, precisely in the center of his control medallion. Sho couldn't hold back the scream of pain that came when the spines were ripped from his arm simultaneously with the control medallion sending a jolt of energy directly into his mind. It was worse than when Elagen had struck him, but thankfully it was only an instant of pain before he lost consciousness. Alkenfel watched coldly as Fukumachi fell again, updating his assessments and options. The boy would be unconscious for some time, and as long as he made no move to attack his comatose form, the hyper-protective mode of his armor would not activate. After he finished with Makishima, he could collect the boy, and Chronos would have its long-sought-after Guyver unit. He was dangerous, but perhaps he could be controlled. The Zolord turned away casually, raising one hand to intercept the second Mega Smasher blast that Guyver 3 had fired at him while he had been absorbed with Guyver I. With a soft smile, he flexed his fingers, curling them around the energy that was coming to him, drawing it into himself. It was hot and wild, but it was something he could control, and it was energy he could use. "I thank you, Zeus," he said, almost laughing at the outraged confusion he could feel coming from the Dark Guyver. "Your first strike did lower my shield, but Guyver I showed you that, but as I told him, I am not without defenses. I was designed solely for combat, unlike your pitiful units. And while Valkus might consider your form the ultimate battle creature, you are nothing before me." He opened his eyes wide, releasing a general wave of energy. Makishima narrowed his eyes, refusing to be beaten down by the power Alkenfel was releasing. Through his unit he was trying to wake up Fukumachi, but he knew it would be a while before the boy could rejoin the battle in any meaningful way. That was nothing new though, he was accustomed to fighting alone. However, if Alkenfel could absorb energy, and his spine stop any physical attack, that did leave only a few options open to him. He growled softly, using the noise to send a sonic attack at the Zolord, watching carefully for signs of defense. Through his unit he could see the air distortion that was his attack closing on the Zolord, but before it connected, several of the longer golden spines flickered forward, fanning themselves rapidly. They set up a high-frequency sonic resistance that absorbed his attack. Ingenious, he was forced to admit to himself, but he knew Alkenfel had to have a weakness. The advents would not have created a weapon they could not stop deliberately. The bio-boosted human that had caused them to leave the Earth was an error, not something of their planning. He had to find that weakness, and he had to find it fast. He growled again. This was just one of the reasons he was not ready to fight Alkenfell. He had fully half his thunderbolts looking for clues about Alkenfell's weakness, and he had been going to act only when he had something firm to test upon the Zolord. No time to regret, he forcibly reminded himself, dodging a small barrage of energy pellets that Alkenfell sent in his direction. Makishima dove to the ground, sweeping over it in an evasive move but collecting a fistful of small stones during his passage. As he rose, he turned to face Alkenfell, still dodging, and began firing the stones towards the Zolord, letting them come from all angles and not really caring about the full accuracy of his aim. He interspersed the attack with sonic blasts, knowing the Zolord would not absorb them. A slight smile crossed his features when he ran out of stones, coming to hover about even with Alkenfell. "Is that all?" the Zolord questioned, raising one eyebrow. No, for the first time in the long years of their conflict, the leader of the rebels spoke to his ultimate enemy. "Good," Alkenfell purred before he blinked in sudden surprise. "Where?" he questioned, but then he heard the hiss of displaced air behind him and felt his spines move to block the attack. Makishima was better than Fukamachi though, and pulled back his attack before he was skewered, leaping back through the air to once again stare at his opponent. "A good strategy," the Golden Zolord admitted, "but even with teleportation you are not fast enough to attack me in such a manner." "So, Guyver 3, Zeus. What are you going to do?" Alkenfell's voice dripped with sardonic amusement. "When you had lived as long as he had, it was hard to find things that entertained you, and when he did, he enjoyed them to the utmost." Makishima blinked as he regarded his opponent, and when Alkenfell made no move to attack him, he used the opportunity to hunt down an elusive presence that had been in his mind since he had joined with his Guyver unit. He grabbed it forcefully, in much the way he had done when he had first bonded with his unit, and forced it to reveal its secrets. "Tell me," he mentally commanded it, allowing no room for it to question his authority. "Show me, give me the power." Sho had never done this to his unit, and that was why he would always be the weaker Guyver. This punishing insistence on absolute obedience from the unit was why Sho had lost the gigantic unit to him, and it was why we was going to defeat Alkenfell even without Guyver I's help. Agito gasped as he felt the unit respond to his command, drawing more life energy from him, but he knew that power was even now being transformed into speed and strength he could use to fight Alkenfell. There was no outward change in his armor. The only change was the octave of energy that he was releasing unconsciously. "Ho!" Alkenfell murmured, sensing the change an instant before Zeus disappeared again. It was closer this time. Makishima was faster, but Alkenfell's spine still moved in defense in time to block the attack. "More," Agito demanded of the gigantic unit, teleporting almost continuously in an attempt to confuse the Zolord. He ignored the power he could feel the unit devouring from him. He had to win this fight. Once he won, he could rest for as long as it took to regain the lost energy, but he had to win. That was the only way for him to live. Despite the laid-back attitude Alkenfell had displayed so far, that deadly certainty was hovering beneath the Zolord's words. Sho shook his head, tasting blood as he came round. He coughed, forcing the blood from his system, and closed his eyes, focusing on the feelings coming from the Guyver unit. It was at work all over his body, and while it had taken care of most of the damage, there was phantom pain coming from almost everywhere. He grunted, slowly rising to his feet. "I can't have been out long," the conclusion was easily reached. If he had have been unconscious for too long, his unit would have taken action. "Makishima," he murmured, looking up at the sounds of battle. Guyver 3 was moving rapidly around the Zolord, and while it looked like the Guyver had the upper hand, Sho could feel amusement coming from Alkenfell and a well-contained but slowly rising sense of worry coming from Makishima. He shook his head as he followed Makishima's movements. The Dark Guyver was fast, but he was still moving. He wasn't teleporting. He'd probably begun teleporting, but his unit had moved the motion into something else. The difference was slight, but Sho could see the lines of movement disturbing the air, and if he could see them, then surely Alkenfell could as well, and seeing him act upon them. Fukamachi nodded to himself in understanding when Makishima closed for an attack that was blocked by Alkenfell's golden spines. He looked down at his arm. His armor was whole again, but still repairing itself. There were still small ringlet irregularities which were rapidly smoothing into solid finish that was the Guyver armor. It was only a matter of time before Alkenfell tired of this game and they were destroyed. The Zolord was simply biding his time. Faster, he thought, watching a few more passes. You have to be faster, Agito. I have to be faster. Father. Sho whispered, closing his eyes, seeing his beloved patriarch in his mind's eye. Please. Mizuki. The image he saw changed, replaced by one of the red-haired girl in full tirade against him and her brother. She had taken such good care of them all. Please, Father. Give me the strength to protect her. I need the strength, the power to fight him. I cannot let him be unprotected again. Give me the power. Makishima faltered, feeling a burst of recognition fly through his mind, much like the one that had occurred when Fukamachi's control medallion had been ripped out. But the boy was not in danger now. He halted his flight, barely 2 meters from Alkenfell, as pain zigzagged its way down his chest. Arrah! He looked down and found his armor whole but bursting with light, and beneath his armor his eyes widened as he released what was happening. No, he cried, stumbling in the air but thankful that the Zolord was not attacking and was in fact even more entertained by this new development. With a ripping noise, the gigantic armor retracted from the dark Guyver, pulling back into its protective casing and hovering for an instant before it vanished. Makishima struggled to remain aloft, his vision blurring. What? He coughed the question, looking towards Alkenfell. What did you do? Something had taken the armor from him. He hadn't run out of bioenergy yet and could still maintain the gigantic form. Fukamachi didn't have the strength to pull the armor from him, so the Zolord must have done something. Alkenfell questioned in amusement, closing the distance between them and speaking face to face with Makishima, much as he had done with Sho. I did nothing. I was simply observing your slow attacks when this happened, although I admit, it is a nice twist in this battle. A battle which is over, Alkenfell. The voice was quiet but unbelievably powerful, and the Zolord stiffened as he felt fire explode its way down his back. In a flash he moved, pulling away from Makishima, and scanned the environment for his attacker. There was nothing on this planet that was fast enough to get through his defenses. None of his Zolords. Not the renegade Zoanoid Aptum, not Guyver I, and not even the gigantic Guyver III, but as he reached around to touch his back he could feel his life force freely flowing, and when he brought his clawed hand back around, the thick sticky substance liberally covered his fingertips. Who? He snarled, looking around, Guyver III completely forgotten. His body was already healing the wound. While it was meant to be impossible to directly land an attack upon him, the Advents had taken no chances. He was the ultimate battle creature. He could survive any attack, and he would do so now and rip the one who had dared to draw his blood limb from limb. Impossible. The word came from the two opposing leaders as their searching eyes located nothing but the hovering form of gigantic Guyver I. It's over, Guyver I said again, raising his fist as his vibroblade emitted an audible hum. Makishima blinked. That was Sho's voice, his conscious voice, but there was a note of authority, of absolute certainty in his actions that he had never heard before, and it left something inside him dazed. Have I completely underestimated this pawn? Agito thought with a distinct note of disbelief as he lowered himself to a place where he could observe without endangering himself. He shook his head irritably after a moment. He can't be that powerful, but still. This was a good opportunity. Even if Sho was powerful enough to defeat the Zolord, he was still politically naive. He still refused to see the realities of the world. Alkenfell must be defeated, he reminded himself. It does not matter who does it. All that matters is who remains at the end. With a cold smile, Agito looked up at the proceedings. A small adjustment in his plans was called for, but it was nothing Zeus could not handle. You are fast, Alkenfell, Sho said in an emotionless voice. Your defenses are fast, but I can be faster. Without your shield, Zolord, and facing something that is faster and stronger than your automatic defenses, you cannot defend against a direct physical attack. Alkenfell smiled wanly, sending a wave of reassurance to Murakami. The other Zolord was linked to him permanently and had felt the turn in battle, but his presence was not required. He was still more than capable of defeating the stronger than expected Guyver I and the weakened Guyver III. Besides, if the Guyver truly believed he was defenseless, then he was still a child. Alkenfell said nothing, he simply gathered himself, flexing his fingers, and prepared to meet this new attack. Fukamachi nodded, falling into his own battle stance, and for an instant the two of them sized their opponent before they both leapt into action. Neither of them made a battle cry, but the noise when they clashed was deafening. Alkenful's elbow spines melded together, giving him a blade with which to meet Fukumachi's attack. Their blades impacted with each other for an instant before they both drew back and lunged forward again. The noise as two competing frequencies clashed was incredible and echoed for miles around. Makishima blinked as he watched the battle. This was the type of combat he had been trying to lure Alkenfel into. A constantly shifting battle where the Guyver Units' speed and healing abilities could be used to their best advantage, but it appeared the Zolord was equal to the battle. With a sudden lunge forward, Alkenfel swung through empty air. He immediately gathered himself using all his senses to search for Guyver I's location. He started as he realized his opponent was waiting for him to turn. "I said this battle was over, Alkenfel," Sho said quietly as the Zolord turned to face him. "Will you surrender?" "Surrender?" Even Makishima was surprised by the question. Sho couldn't possibly be that naive, but it appeared he was. "I am Chronos," Alkenfel said slightly incredulously. "I will never surrender to you." "So be it," Fukumachi said quietly, clenching his fists. He took one deep breath, gathering himself. He had fought and killed many Zoanoids. He had gotten over the guilt of knowing he was killing those who had lives, who had hopes and dreams, who may have had families waiting for their return, but this would be something different. The Zolord did not have a family, but he was the key to Chronos. His death would result in the collapse of the world, and while his death would come in the heat of combat, this one was coldly planned, and would be deliberately executed. Sho breathed out slightly, and as Alkenfel lunged towards him he vanished, appearing for an instant behind the Zolord and slashing hard before he vanished again. Alkenfel stiffened, arching back and partially crying out. Fukumachi appeared again, cutting at the Zolord's side before teleporting to the other side and cutting again. Again and again gigantic Guyver Eye appeared and disappeared, flickering around Alkenfel, cutting him each time, drawing blood slowly staining the gold red. It seemed to take forever, but it was only a few seconds before Sho teleported to a position above the doomed Zolord, all plates on his Mega Smasher unit sliding open, charging themselves for an instant before the blast was released. Alkenfel looked up into the blast, his green eyes widening. The silver orbs embedded in his body sparked, emitting an ineffectual shield that was consumed in an instant. He didn't have time to cry out, and with the multiple cuts crossing his body he couldn't absorb the energy and it seeped inside, burning him from within. He tried to teleport away, but with the maelstrom around him and the echoing scream of the Guyver's vibroblade still fresh in his mind, he couldn't lock on to any location. He screamed mentally, impressing his final orders upon Murakami and howling his frustration to the universe, reaching for the one being he knew but continued to pour the energy out. It dug into the forest, eating out a huge crater. As the blast continued, the crater grew as more earth was vaporized with the heat. Eventually the energy faded as Alkenfel's mental screams silenced. The Zolord was gone, vaporized so that not even ash remained. Sho bowed his head, breathing hard, and as the gigantic unit retracted he sank slowly to the ground, falling to his knees in exhaustion. "It's over," he whispered. Feeling strangely hollow. Chronos was not yet destroyed, but with Alkenfel's death it was all but over. He was still dazed as Makishima grabbed him, pulling them both into the air. "Move. Chronos isn't just going to sit still," Agito snarled at Sho, but still dragged the limp Guyver Eye with him as he sought safe haven. The head had just been cut from the body, but the body was stubborn and would need its own death blow dealt to it. That was how Alkenfel was defeated, and in essence it was the defeat of Chronos, but it still took several months and some very fierce battles before they admitted defeat and allowed the return of civilian government. After that, it should have all been over, but the fall of Chronos proved to be just the beginning. Minor rebellions by those who were Zoanoids were expected and had been planned for, and while there were a few, they were mostly put down peacefully, although some of the Zoanoids only sought their deaths and the deaths of others. In these cases the efforts made to keep the casualties down were usually effective, although some innocent lives were lost. It was inevitable now, I see, although I still regret their loss. When Chronos fell, I had the naive belief that the Zoanoid technology would disappear, but that was pure naivety. Despite the pain that technology had caused me and those I held dear, there was no way it would just be forgotten, but at least with Chronos' fall humans finally had the choice of whether to become a Zoanoid or not. And despite how I may feel personally about that technology, the benefits it could deliver to humanity were too great. The ability to heal any disease, to regrow limbs for those who had lost theirs or organs for those needing a transplant was something that could not be denied to humanity. The technology is the ultimate form of genetic engineering, but Chronos had taken it so far that it was considered pure, almost magical, and it was accepted. There was little choice. Chronos had processed too many humans in the times before X-Day and then after. But except for a few troublemakers, most zoanoids were content to return to being human. I said the fall of Chronos was just the beginning, and it was. With them gone, the threat of global domination should have dissipated, but instead it simply shifted, biding its time until the world once again became accustomed to peace before striking. X-Day was a dark, confusing day for humanity, but in its own way it was honest. But the day that was codenamed God's Ascension was the ultimate form of betrayal. End chapter 1. The Conquered. Thank you for listening. Join me again to listen to the next chapter.